Hey everybody, this is Tom Lukman, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to make your own Blender wormhole. Some of you have been asking me to do this after seeing my Blender wormhole video I recently published on my YouTube channel, so here we go. Now we're going to start with our default Blender scene. I already deleted the default cube and the default light, and we will start by adding, so Shift A, add a cylinder. Now with the cylinder, before we add it, 32 steps default is fine. We will just change this and gone to nothing because I don't want anything on top and bottom. And this is pretty much it. We will go to edit mode, front view, zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to scale this cylinder along the z-axis just so that I roughly get square faces on it. And I will also move it up a little bit just to align the origin point of the cylinder with the bottom of the cylinder itself. And another thing we want to do here is go to our shading and set smooth shading here. And we're pretty much done with the cylinder, except for the fact I'm going to UV unwrap it as well. So I will select these two vertices to get the edge, Control E, and mark seam. Now I won't actually be using any real bitmap texture in this example, but in case you guys want to add your own, this is why I'm showing you how to do it quickly. So with that seam marked, we will go to our UV image editor and with our cursor over our cylinder, hit U and unwrap. We pretty much have our unwrap done. Now when you will do your own texturing, you will probably have to tweak the size of this this strip, but it's really up to you. Like I said, I won't be using this in this example. So that's pretty much it for our cylinder. Now we need to convert it into a tunnel. Now the way I did it, and the easiest way is just to have the cylinder follow a curve, and to make some nice little curves in Blender, there is an add-on. If you go to add curve here on user preferences, there's extra objects add. Click it, and now when you add a new curve, you should have some extra object option and select spirals. Now you're welcome to play with those settings any way you want. I will just quickly change my spiral type to 3 so that I get a tall spiral, and I'll give it about 5 turns. Yes, that's correct. That looks okay to me. Now I'll quickly jump to edit mode, select everything by A key, and I will scale everything along the Z just to get a really tall curve. I want it a bit stretched. And now I'm going to select deselect everything, and I'm going to zoom in here quickly, and I'm going to select this and delete those vertices because I don't want these sharp beginnings and endings for my tunnel. Just doesn't look okay, so I'll delete it. And there we go. Now with all the nodes selected, I will just grab it and set my number 1 vertex to be roughly on the origin point there, so that it's just easier to understand this. Now before I turn this into a tunnel, a very important thing, actually I will show you the mistake because you will probably make it. So we'll go to the modifiers, we will add an array modifier. What array modifiers do, for example, if I go X is obviously wrong, we want our cylinder to go up, so this is why I switched to Z1. And what this does, it actually repeats something. So if I set my count to 55, it will make 55 copies of the cylinder up. That's the purpose. And we will also select merge here in case there is a little bit of space between those. We want the vertices between those cylinders merging so that we get a tunnel, not something broken. Now, since we're going to follow a curve, this fit count doesn't really apply to us. In our example, we will change this to fit to curve. There. Now, in order to actually make it work, we have to add another modifier, the curve modifier. And if I select spiral here, now we can see something's being done. Now remember when I mentioned I would make a mistake on purpose. Well, here it is. No matter how I fiddle with this, it never works correctly. Now the reason for this is that I had to actually, when I was playing with my curve, I had to apply its size, rotation and scale, everything. So now with that applied, when I start messing with the array modifier, it should follow a -z should be correct. And if we fit curve spiral, there we go, Z. Now my tunnel is a little bit too, how should I say, sharp. It has sharp turns, so what I'll have to do is actually scale the spiral a bit more along the z-axis. Yes, and I'll just grab it up. There we go. Now since I've done this in edit mode, I don't have to reapply scale and everything. And this is pretty much what we wanted, some spirally tunnel. It's not too sharp and it should work pretty nice. Now in my original animation it was half a minute long if I remember correctly, and that's 720 frames. So we will change the length to my animation here. And there we go. Now I want to make my camera follow this curve. In order to get that, first of all, we have to turn on our end menu with our camera selected and reset all of these. Well, we probably don't, but let's just make sure they're all set to 0 so we don't have any confusion at all. Now this will reset our camera to some default position. Now with our curve selected, we have to go to the curve option here and enable path animation. When on frame 1 here, I will keyframe the evaluation time to, so by pushing I will keyframe it to 0. Then I will move to my final frame, 720, and I will set this evaluation time to something. I know 550 is correct, should be correct, and keyframe it again. Now what that does, it should move our camera somewhere roughly about here, but which is still far enough so that we don't get the end of the tunnel. We don't want the black hole at the end of our animation. Now our camera still isn't doing anything because it needs to have a constraint, and we will give it a follow path constraint, follow our spiral. And if we go to frame 1 here, we will, well, if we move it, we can see, if we move the timeline, we can see the camera moving. It's only not following. So we have to tell it to follow the curve, and we have to tell it that y -z is forward and y is up. And this should work. And if we go to our 3 camera view and hit Alt A, when we animate, we should see the camera follow the spiral. And it does. Now, obviously, our lens are not very well done because we can hardly see the tunnel. So the way I fixed it, I just set my sensor to 90. And I will also add a camera render preset to be some 4.3 aspect, just to get less of a wide angle and just to get more square view of the video. Since the tunnel is round, this should make it work a little bit better. Now if I just scroll down my video, I can pretty much see that we're doing okay, except for the fact that we are running out of tunnel way too early, and the reason for this is my mistake. We are using 720 frames, not 100 frames here. I forgot to add this. Yes. And another thing I noticed when I was scrolling down my animation is that I need to go to my graph editor with my spiral selected. Select everything, AA, hit V and select vector. Now this will give us a constant speed of the camera, so it won't accelerate at the beginning and decelerate at the end. And this is pretty much it for our animation. Now what we have to do is just make this thing look nice when it renders. And I will quickly set up some materials here. Oops, made a mistake here. There we go. I'll just give myself a 3D view here and another 3D view here. Disable those menus. We will go to, I use cycles for my rendering, and I will do this here. I will go to the node editor. Where is it? There it is. And over here we will start rendering. Yes. And here I will go to wireframe view so I can see what I'm doing. Now with our tunnel selected, we are going to add a new material. By default it's going to add a boring diffuse thing. We don't want that. We actually want our shader to be emission shader, so that we get light. Now from this perspective you don't see much. I'm going to add a texture. First of all, I'll start by adding a texture coordinate, then I will add a texture. In my example I used Voronoi. Pull generated to vector. Now if you're going to use your own image, you will have to put UV here and then get image. That's why we UV unwrapped first. But like I said, we won't be using it, and generated worked better for my example. And now if I connect this here, we can already see some kind of texture going on. Now in my original example I set the scale to somewhere around 2 so that we get bigger rings. And in order to give it some color, we have to add a mix RGB color node. Plug this to the bottom and just pick a color. I picked some crazy blue. You're welcome to pick up whatever you want, of course, and also you're welcome to play with your own examples, different texture types and so. And in order to give it, I didn't want it to be blue and white, boring, I used the RGB curve to tweak my green a little bit. Come on. It's a little bit slow because it's rendering as I'm doing it. Okay, there we go. So this is roughly what I did. And we're all set. Now I'm going to remove those two windows. We don't need them anymore. We'll go back to our 3D view, and if I give it a test render, this is pretty much what I had in mind, except for the fact that we can see that it's a little bit choppy on these borders, so we can see that it's 32 steps cylinder. Now in order to quickly fix this with our cylinder selected, just go to the modifiers and add yourself a subdivision surface with render 2. That should, that should give you a nice smooth tunnel when you render it. And that's pretty much it. Now in order to render this, you should, I recommend you render it to PNG. This will give you a sequence of images which you can combine in Blender later. Just make sure to pick up some folder here where you want your images to go. You know, probably don't want them to go to the default TMP. And that's pretty much it, folks. I also fiddled in the compositor a little bit to get some fog in the background. Now I'm wasn't going to show you this, but I'm going to include the original sample blend files that I used. One blend file will be the exact file that I used, and you can, when you go to the compositor by clicking Control left arrow, you will see my node setup there. And I will also include the sequencer setup so you can see how I combine the video together. Hopefully this will be helpful. Now for those of you guys watching on YouTube, you should go to my website www.tomlukman.com and download those files if you're interested. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something new, and happy blending.